was a 24-hour war for the Australians with no defined front line. A war where even precious breaks were contaminated by enemy presence.
When we would get a day off during the day to go into Vung Tau, there was more tension because, you see, Vung Tau was used as a venue for rest and recuperation, but it wasn't only used by us, it was also used by the Viet Cong. So they would be, we know they'd be in town, and we'd be in town, so it was continual tension all the time. Even if you went to Saigon, it was exactly the same thing.
Even during our civic action program, where the medical needs of local villages were attended to, or houses and community buildings destroyed by war rebuilt, no one could be sure of their safety. But the most difficult and dangerous task was rooting out the enemy from the heart of local villages, where they had enjoyed 20 years of dominance. Almost inevitably, it seriously damaged our relationship with the South Vietnamese.
Tức là khóa cửa không cho tháo về, tức là ở trên 3 độ trên ép xuống, đến cuối cùng là bao.
Our intention was to completely surround the Australians, to force them into one small group. As we advanced to close the net, we wanted to kill them all. We wanted an all-out fight to strike decisively, for once and for all, for them to die or for us to die.
Off we went out through the wire. Now at this stage, you could hardly breathe. It rained so heavily up there. The rain, I think, had an incidental advantage for us because it actually masked the sound of our vehicles leaving the task force.
Enemy numbers continued to swell, and the platoon most under attack is still isolated. Only 10 of the original 28 men are now able to fight.
I'd made a decision that there's no way the company or anyone was going to come and get us. And I had to make a decision, that I've lived with all the time. You know, it's a decision I made at the time. I decided to get as many out as possible.
A dangerous rescue attempt is made but falls short when it's confronted by heavy fire.
11 Platoon's radio had been shot out, and we had now lost communications with them. There was no way of us advising 11 Platoon that we were there. I could only hope that the longer I stayed there, the longer he realized that there was no VC behind him, that must be because there were Australians behind him, so that he would then move back towards us.
Some of the guys had their grenades out in front. Some guy had a machete in his hand. He was going to take off the head of it if a Charlie came close to him. But there was absolutely nothing we could do. We'd exhausted ammunition. We had, in fact, taken as much casualties as we could. It was time to piss off.
2 helicopters loaded with life-saving ammunition make their cautious way to the battlefield.
I remember we lifted up above the trees and it was just pouring with rain. We could see the battlefield as soon as we got to the top of the rubber plantation. So we saw a road which we knew led out to Long Tan, so we turned left. So we called turn now, and they rolled on their side and all the ammunition just dropped straight down through the rubber trees over that point.
After an initial reluctance to accept this mission, the Air Force is roundly praised for their skill and daring. From the early days, the Royal Australian Air Force made its presence felt in Vietnam. Australian Caribous, affectionately known as Wallaby Airlines, were real workhorses. Australian Canberra bombers joined the Americans and flew on dangerous and successful low-level bombing missions. But it was with the Army's Special Air Service, better known as the SAS, that chopper pilots from the Australian Air Force set a new standard for teamwork in life-threatening situations.
We had occasions where people were shot at, being dropped off on the landing zones. The helicopters would return under fire and pick us up again. I had a patrol of mine where in the jungle I'd had a man shot, and so out of the 5 of us we had 2 carrying that fella, and the helicopters came and got us, and there was no landing place. We had to be winched up through the jungle whilst we were in contact with the enemy, and the door gunners were firing at the enemy directly above us as we were being winched out. With the SAS, it was just a 5-man patrol. So in your operations, you needed to take everything on your back, and within those 5 men that would sustain you for a week at a time in areas that were 30 kilometres or more away from the task force base. We had no direct air support. We had no artillery support. We were totally left to our own devices. So we became a very close-knit, highly professional group of people that through our training in New Guinea and our other long exercises in Australia, we got to know one another so well that we could almost pass messages just looking into the eyes of the person next to you and with very little facial expression.
Vietnam has been described as a 10-man war, with success favouring small patrols who fought with stealth and surprise. But Australians were also confronted by larger, more traditional conflicts. At the battles of Coral and then Balmoral, ferocious attacks by large numbers of North Vietnamese spanned a period of 26 days. In these encounters, our tanks proved their worth, and Australian artillery was heavily relied on.